Shauna Newborn, and I am the Program Administrator for Graduate Yoga Studies. Again, thank you all for joining us today during our open house with graduate admissions. We're going to start today's info session with a word from our recent alum, as well as a current student. And just so you can kind of get a feel for their experience in the program and what they're doing out in the world now. Amanda, if you could start, I would love for you to introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about your experience in the program.
Awesome. Well, hello, my name is Amanda. I was pulled to LMU after attending some of the Yoga Day events and conferences on Ayurveda and the music and poetics in the Jain and Sikh traditions. I will say the energy of the campus is magnetic, and I learned so much at these events that I just needed more. This last weekend, I started reading Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and this particular excerpt really reminded me of my experience in the program, so I'm going to share really quickly. Coupled to the impulse to share is the mandate to protect. Indigenous knowledge has too often been appropriated by its abductors, so the gift of knowledge must be tightly bound to the responsibility for that knowledge. If indigenous wisdom could be medicine for a broken relationship with the earth, the moral obligation to share the healing must be accompanied by a prescription to avoid misuse. I hoped always to inspire an authentic revitalization of relationship with the land, not by borrowing it from someone else, but by finding your roots and remembering how to grow your own. So Robin continues on, and at some point she says something along the lines of, to understand something, to truly know it, you need to know it physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So with all four of our energy bodies. The yoga studies program at LMU truly helped me to kind of unlearn everything that I had learned about yoga previously, and I was able to meet it with fresh perspective. So it helped me to be more inquisitive, to think more critically, to raise my level of consciousness and practice witness consciousness much more. So I've taught high school courses for like 19 or 20 years now. I currently teach 4 different yoga courses, and my program is registered, a Yoga Alliance registered yoga school. Because of my experience at LMU, I know that my program is safer. I offer a better understanding of body mechanics and how the body works, a deeper appreciation of Sanskrit and sharing the language. My high school students know pretty much what I know about history and the roots and comparative philosophies. So although I offer a 200-hour certificate, my students complete somewhere between 540 and 720 hours with me. And it's truly an education that's rooted in respect and awe and appreciation with the scholarly and scientific sources. It's no comparison to what I had for my 200-hour program here in Phoenix. And that's not to diss them, but it's the depth and the breadth of knowledge that LMU offers. I think it's really important to have to truly honor the divine. And I attribute my ability to do what I do the way I do it in large part to my experience in schooling at LMU. I am very, very thankful to my professors because through this program, I will say I am definitely a better version of myself. I am a much better teacher, and I'm just thankful. And the yoga studies program, yoga therapy program, it feels like a family. So it's community, it's connection, and it is just knowledge and support in seeing things in new ways.
Wow, thank you so much. I have Braiding Sweetgrass on my read list. So your rendition just told me to go pull it out and read it ASAP. Thank you so much for sharing. For those of you who are tuning in, if you have questions for Amanda, please write them down. You can put them in the chat. I would love for Xylo to share their experience, and then Megan as a current student, and then we'll take questions for the students before moving on to the next portion of the program. Yeah. So Xylo, please take it away.
Hello, my name is Dylo. So I started my graduate studies in the middle of COVID in 2020 in August, when I was in the middle of the jungle in Costa Rica. 2020, I think, was hard on probably every human that is alive. So I really found the solace in going back to school and connecting with a program that included all of my interests in a way that felt authentic and legit. So I was really grateful right off the bat that this program even existed, and it provided almost like a healthy escape for me during that whole time of COVID. And then moving to Los Angeles a year later and navigating a whole new city after being in jungles for 2 years brought up a lot of my own challenges. And I was in the yoga therapy concentration track for the yoga studies program. So I wasn't in the whole yoga therapy certificate. I think that would have been too much on my system during that time. But I really appreciated being able to take some of the yoga therapy courses and to focus my research and my thesis on a theme and a topic in the yoga therapy realm. So I spent probably the whole second year working with yoga therapy clients in that practicum, and also working with my own nervous system of finding ways to heal complex trauma through yoga therapy techniques, and using yoga therapy as a supportive modality for healing through complex trauma. And that was a huge journey and part of my own life, really. And I found a lot of inclusivity in the program, both in the academic material, in being accepted as a non-binary trans person, and also the way that the program was sensitive to my needs in terms of my nervous system and in terms of needing trauma-informed care. So LMU in general kind of hit all those boxes, and the yoga studies program was especially sensitive and inclusive in those aspects. So that allowed me to continue and complete my studies even when I was facing a lot of major health struggles. And I feel really, really grateful now, because probably the first 6 months after graduation was a very hard time, in and out of hospitals for, during that entire time of 6 months. And what came from that was traveling to Peru in November of 2022. So graduating in May 2022, in and out of hospitals, getting to Peru, and I was facilitating yoga teacher trainings. And I realized that all of the classes that I was teaching, the way that I was holding space for the students, the yoga studies program, the yoga therapy material prepared me for that. I felt totally confident teaching yoga sutras and teaching the philosophy of Patanjali and guiding people safely in their bodies and their minds and their souls, if you will. So that was really cool to have that direct kind of application of the program's material and my own self-development as well. And now I am living in Arizona, working at a residential treatment center where I teach trauma-informed yoga, and I also work as a counselor. So this was a place very dear to my heart, where I was a patient myself, and now I work as a holistic counselor. And even things logistically, like learning how to do SOAP notes in yoga therapy, which is taking subjective, objective data, writing your assessment of your client, and the plan for future sessions. I thought I would never, ever use SOAP notes ever again. I hated them, didn't understand them. And now I do about 60 to 120 SOAP notes every day for my patients here. So even that aspect, I was like, wow, this yoga studies master's degree prepared me for a job in counseling, which is really cool. In addition to my prior experience and my prior training and credentials in that. So that was an added bonus of being able to use my master's degree topic. And when people hear that, they're like, oh, so you do physical exercise. And anyone who's in this, just physical embodiment, so much more. So yeah, I'm in there. I feel like I can talk for a very long time.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I appreciate that. Yes, seeing being in it myself, because I am also a student currently, the embodiment of what we are learning is so near and dear and valuable to us, to me specifically as students. And what I'm hearing is from Xylo and from Amanda as well. Thank you so much, Xylo, for sharing. Again, questions, if you have them, we will take them right after Megan, our current student, shares her experience being a current student in the program.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. I am in cohort 9, so this is my second year, and I am in the Low Residency program. Incredibly grateful for that option, because otherwise I would not be able to be doing this. So I think that's a really, I'm just so grateful for it, because you know, I am based in Portland, Oregon. I have been teaching for over 2 decades. And so my entry point was a little bit maybe different, especially hearing what Amanda was saying of unlearning everything she learned. I feel like I had a really strong foundation in teaching and in everything that I learned up to the point that I entered the program. But what the program has helped me do, that I'm so, again, grateful for, is just clear up discrepancies, to help connect dots to things that I had heard from my teachers before, but I didn't quite know where they came from. So now I'm really getting very clear on the text that these things are coming from. And I think the other aspect of the program that I'm so in love with is the critical lens, just being able to critically look back at the history of yoga and have a greater clarity. And again, kind of cleaning it up a little bit, because I think probably, you know, most of us are aware that there's a lot of tropes in yoga and a lot of sort of these yoga-isms that aren't necessarily grounded or resourced. And that's what the scholarship of this program has really helped, you know, just to feel a little bit more clear about what's happening. Also, one of the things that I loved so much was my focus in Dr. Judith's Yoga, Mindfulness, and Social Change. That particular certificate was life-changing. I absolutely love that program. And it is still a part of my life today. The folks in the program, a few of us worked together and we did our final project together, and we've continued on, and we are doing work together today, and I love it. And so that was, you know, one of those beautiful little gems that just sort of came out of being with like-minded folks. The other part, I think that probably the others have said, is just connection, you know, that I've made with my cohort members, both within my actual cohort and above and below. So that's been just such a delightful experience. I think maybe in some weird way, I wasn't really expecting that. And maybe that's because being in low residency, just kind of figured there would be maybe more disconnect there, but it's been profound. I feel like the relationships that I've made are relationships that I will have throughout my lifetime. The other thing, I have to give a shout out to the faculty, because they are amazing. And, you know, truly, you are in such good hands with these folks. In, you know, all transparency, I think for many years, I was very reluctant to sign on with maybe the more, you know, sort of well-known or international type teachers. That just didn't quite, and it's not to take away from anyone, it's just I wasn't quite on board with it. And I just feel so taken care of and in such trust with the faculty at LMU. I cannot say enough. The learning that I have done in these last 2 years has been extraordinary. And I think Amanda used the word awe when she was talking at one point, and that really is how I feel on a daily basis. I'm just in awe of everything that I get to experience, and know that it is hard work. You will work really hard and be prepared for that. It is demanding and in the best way. And I just feel that it is adding so much richness and purpose to my life. And, you know, I'm in the field every day out there teaching the public. And, you know, I do feel that, you know, what I am gaining in terms of this program is continuing to enrich what I offer others. And people comment to me about it on a regular basis. So I think, again, that's a testament to the quality of the program. And then, you know, I came into the program with really just kind of seeing like, what's going to happen? I don't know. I didn't really have an objective as to what I was expecting upon graduation, but what I was willing to kind of throw the dice with is that I wanted to create opportunity. I wanted to make new connections, and I wanted to expand beyond what I was doing. And as of thus far, all of that has, you know, come to pass. And I am just very excited to have yet another year of studies. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing, Megan. Just to reiterate, we are currently talking to alum as well as a current student about their experience here in the Graduate Yoga Studies program. I will open the floor up to questions. If any of you have any, I would love to lead off with one question. One question that I have been getting from a lot of interested applicants is, you know, and you touched on this a little bit, Megan, about speaking about community and how you feel in community, but maybe speak about, you know, virtual versus in person. Xylo, you had experience with both being virtual and in person. And Megan, you and Amanda are both low residency and virtual. What was your experience as a student in the classroom?
I don't know who started. Okay. Yes, so I found the sense of community that we built honestly felt the same whether we were on Zoom or together in person, which is really unique because I don't really find that to be the case necessarily all the time. To be able to feel like you have this circle that you can rely on and that you can put your trust in. And even like in the yoga therapy classes, especially, we were using each other essentially to practice. And that felt very safe, whether we were in person or through a screen. So that sense of community is definitely there. I much prefer being in person. I feel like there's a level of co-regulating with others and connecting that is hard to translate through a screen, but this program has proven that it is possible. And when we all met up for graduation in person, it was so surreal in a way because it, on the one hand, it's like, well, you're real. But on the other hand, like it felt like these are people that we've known for 2 years and that we journeyed together with for 2 or 3 years. So I don't know if that answered that.
And I'll add on, I mirror everything that Xylo said. At the end, when we graduated, there was someone who said, oh, and Amanda, we've never even met in person. And I said, yeah, we did. And because I truly felt, I was convinced that we had been together in space before in person. That's how close knit, you know, through all of the Zoom and iPhone, all of the study sessions, like I was convinced that we had spent time in person together. So yeah, I think it was a very, very beautiful experience through those circumstances to be hybrid.
I would echo all of that as well. And I, you know, being just a little bit behind the other two, I did have the opportunity to come to campus for the first 2 weeks for the foundations course. So I was able to meet my cohort in person and get to meet some of the faculty in person. And then we were also able to go to India together. So, you know, we had that time together in person as well. And of course, you know, the in-person, you know, it's so delightful. But, you know, I mean, the virtual platform, I'm, like I said before, I'm just so grateful for it because I wouldn't be able to do this otherwise. And I do feel like, in my cohort, I can only speak for, we make such an effort to maintain contact and to ask questions and to go back and forth with, inviting folks to different things, even from a distance. So, like I said before, I feel like I've made relationships and friendships with folks that I will have for the rest of my life.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If there are any questions from our attendees, please feel free to raise your hand or fabulous, please go ahead.
I'm Shannon. I am in Atlanta. And one of the questions I had was for Megan. You talked about, the program being very demanding and hard work. And one of, the questions I had generally was just about the workload, kind of getting a sense of what that looks like on a weekly basis, what that consists of. Are there projects? Are there quizzes? Are there writing assignments? I'm somebody who would be working full-time while going through the program. So of course, one of the things I want to assess is to make sure I can do both endeavors successfully.
Yeah, I think the challenge with that question, of course, is quantifying what that means for each individual. And I think in my moments where I have felt a bit overwhelmed, I just have to remind myself, like, this is a master's program. It should be demanding. And so there is that happening. If it makes you, I don't know. I mean, I am a single parent to a 14-year-old daughter. I am teaching full time. My life is very, very full. But I have managed to, figure out how to make it work the best that I can. And sometimes that means that I am feeling like I'm kind of flying in by the seat of my pants, and I don't love that feeling, but I also recognize that I'm working with things that I have the best that I can. And that's going to be different for everybody. But, I think if you want to do it, you'll figure out a way to do it. There are several people in our cohort that do work full-time jobs and that have families, and they, make it work. And I think just probably being realistic about eliminating, certain things from your life. You're just going to have to somehow make some room, and that might mean maybe you see your friends a little less or whatever it might be that you do. But yeah, and I think also just remembering that it is a finite amount of time. And I think that when we have that understanding, then it's possible to make things work. I hope that answered your question.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Shannon, I've also asked the professors to speak to that question when they talk about the program. So stay tuned for more response to that. Suzanne?
Hi, yeah, thank you for sharing, those of you who have shared. I'm wondering about just how I can find out more. I was kind of scouring the website and not seeing a clear view on the faculty and what their background is and their sort of passions and fields of focus. And so yeah, I was just wondering where I could find out more information about that.
They are in line to talk about themselves in just a few minutes. As soon as we close out questions for our alum and current student, we'll move into introductions of all of you, and then we'll hear from our faculty about just that. Yes, there is a question.
I just wanted to ask Megan, are you doing the low residency program?
Yes, low residency.
Okay, because I have a busy life too, but I just wanted to know because I'm going to do the same thing. So thank you.
Of course.
Great to meet everyone. I'm Sayla. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. Any other questions for our alum or current student, Megan?
I actually have one more question.
Yeah.
So I have not been in school now for about 15 years. I do have a graduate degree. I went to law school, but finished up in 2007. So, you know, bottom line is I've been a student, but not in an academic setting for a while. And I wanted to know if any of the former students or current students had a similar experience and what it was like transitioning for them back into an academic environment.
Excellent question. Who wants to take first stabs? Because I think that's many of our students for sure.
I will say very similar. I had a master's degree in cross-categorical special education, so not law, but still, you know, you just take it in stride. I remember the first assignment was like, not the first assignment, but my first paper was like 25 pages. And I was like, 25 pages? How can I do this? But then by the time you get to your thesis, it's like 55, 60 pages. And I'm like, I'll write a 25-page paper like that. So I think and I consider myself, I love to learn, but I am not a scholar by any means. So, you know, I think it comes back to that, your mindset. And like Megan said, if it's something that you want and it's what you're learning out in my opinion, everything that I learned was valuable. So it wasn't like busy work. It wasn't jumping through hoops. It wasn't like everything that I learned was valuable. And then to take it, you can apply it to yourself in addition to however you're planning to share it with the world. So yes, challenges, but I think they were joyful challenges.
And I just want to give a little bit of shout out to Amanda's final project, which was scholarship at the highest level. And she integrated contemporary rap lyric with an experience of increasing self-understanding that was so subtle, so layered, so well documented, but unfortunately, we can't post it because many of the songs that she drew from are copyright. But I do want to say, also applaud that she really sort of got the message of the Bhagavad Gita. You just do it, you don't claim an identity. So even though she says she's not a scholar, she is very much a scholar. And Judith, you had a PhD coming into the program. How did you find it?
Yeah, I was going to address that, I guess, when I was going to talk about the class. So I came into the program with a PhD in information systems and about 25 years as a professor of computer science and information systems. And so I found, and then I came into the program. I think that's an important part of my story too. So I am in cohort number 6 of this program. So after I had kind of semi-retired from that, and I was looking for something to do, and I applied to this program. So as I'm here, I see my former professors, such as Dr. Fazio and Halsa, and it's really nice to see you. So I really very much span that world. When I first finished my the PhD and I started teaching, I was able to say to my students that it wasn't that long ago that I was in the classroom too. And therefore, I really do know the challenges of being in a classroom, trying to balance your life and get things done, mostly though, to get things done the way that you want to, in the manner that you want to achieve things, and learning how to compromise, and at the same time, learning how to manage yourself so you can make things work the way you want. Then years and years went by, and I couldn't say that so much anymore because it had been a long time since I was in the classroom. But again, now I can say that it wasn't that long ago that I was in the classroom. So I found the workload in the master's program at times to be very challenging. there were times when I was in person. LMU has an amazing library, the best study rooms, and I can tell you the best study rooms are the study rooms to go to, the ones where you can see the sun coming up over the ocean, or watch the sun going down over the ocean, and wonderful things. But so it can be very challenging. I found that the faculty were very supportive of the challenges that I faced. And at the same time, they really challenged me to meet the bar that they were setting for the students. And that carried me over some very difficult times in the master's program, particularly because during the time that I was in the master's program, that was when the pandemic hit. So we went from in-person learning to virtual, and that was a very difficult transition also. But now I can say again that it was not that long ago that I too was a student facing many of the challenges and trying to figure out how to make the reading work, and getting to the lectures, and digesting the lecture material, and figuring out how to correlate it to the readings and meet the workload. So that would be my experience as a student in the master's program.
Ayana, if I could ask for a little bit of time now.
Sure.
Great. Okay. So what I would like to hear, because you may be with one another for 2 or 3 years, or maybe even more if you do the postgraduate certificate, I'd like to hear from Suzanne and Shannon and Elise and Selah and Vinyas and Carol and Priti, real quick, who you are, where you are, just really quick, your location and your undergraduate or graduate degrees.
But before we get,
Yeah.
we have them do that, I want to say thank you to
Yes.
Amanda, Xylo, Megan. I appreciate your time so much for sharing. And I will bid you adieu. I know you have to get back to your busy lives, and we will see you next time.
And you're welcome to stay if you want. So. Great.
Fabulous. Okay, who would like to leave off? And if you want to just raise your hand or just unmute yourself and move forward with your introduction, we appreciate it.
How about Suzanne first? Oh, okay, go ahead. Elise, yes.
My name's Elise. I'm from San Francisco. I went back to California, or CIIS, California Institute of Integral Studies, for my bachelor completion program in 2015, which was 30 years after I hadn't completed graduating. And it was awesome. And I took all my life experiences, which included like 1,000 hours of yoga studies through teacher trainings here in the Bay Area. And I kind of interweaved those into my final projects. And so now it's been another, I can't do the math here, 5 years or 6 years. And I've just feel like it's calling to me again to take that next step into a master's program. And yoga studies is where my passion is.
Beautiful. And I just literally minutes ago, got off the phone with a faculty member at California Institute for Integral Studies, Devashish Banerjee.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Shannon.
As I said before, I'm Shannon. I'm in Atlanta. So my undergraduate degree, which again feels like a long time ago, I graduated in 2003, was in sociology, anthropology, and a minor in African American studies, which meant I was going to be a lawyer and go to law school. So went to law school, practiced for a little bit, and have kind of transitioned out of that and have been in the executive search field since then. I have always been a lover of all things yoga since I was introduced to it. I do have my teacher training, but I don't teach. I just kind of did that to deeper my understanding in my own practice. And I would say I'm somebody who loves to learn. I've really been wanting to kind of go in a different direction in my life. Found out about this program and was very excited to learn more.
Great. And did you do your studies in Atlanta?
Law school in Atlanta.
Okay. Ayana, do you want to share where you were?
Oh, yeah, yes, we've spoken before. I was at
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. All right, I keep on asking for Suzanne. Do you want to come on?
Yeah, hi. I'm up in Northern California, up in the Redwoods in Humboldt County, and I went to school at UC Berkeley for my undergraduate and did my best to study yoga there. Started as a language major in many different languages and then abandoned that because I had fallen so deeply in love with yoga as a teenager. And so I got to take classes like, semester-long course on the Mahabharata and, just amazing, opportunities there to make my own major. And what I actually did was collect recipes from around the world, grandmother's recipes for when you're sick, and talk about sort of all of the narratives that go along with healing and dis-ease, and what it means to be dis-eased. And since then, I've been teaching yoga and leading teacher trainings, and I don't subscribe to the Yoga Alliance. I've always felt like it was sort of demeaning to yoga in a way, just with the 200-hour model not feeling at all adequate. And so I have a requirement that my students, sorry, I have a puppy in the background who's digging and it's driving me crazy. Mizu, stop. I have a requirement that my students have studied with me for at least 6 years before I teach them the 200-hour training. And the program's about a year long. And so I've, taught the sutras for 10 years. I've read probably 20 translations in the Bhagavad Gita. I just live and breathe yoga. It's kind of all I do. And I've taught in high schools and, addiction studies programs. And so, yeah, I pretty much just live for yoga and I am so grateful to it. So just known about this program since it started, friends with Stephanie Corigliano. And so she and I just sort of, appear in the Redwoods kind of investigating, do I want to go off to the Himalayas and, try to find a cave, or do I take sort of more of the academic route, which I've always had sort of beef with academia, but also find myself, drawn back in again and again. So I much sort of, part of me is torn and wants to just go in the direction of sort of bhakti and poetry and devotion and song. And I think a big part of me is a little repelled by the sort of psychology infiltration to the yoga world and the way that it's trying to sort of be medicalized. But I also understand it and appreciate it. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Just open, thinking, curious, exploring. Thank you all.
Oh, beautiful. How about Selah?
Hello, everyone. I see familiar faces. Ayana and Mr. Chapo, he's not in the parking lot today. That was a very interesting experience, to see all what was going on, and I was in Brazil. Anyways, I am here in Los Angeles. I originally from Mexico. And I'm very happy to see, like I say, those familiar faces. And, it was very nice to hear these two students, Megan and Challenge. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name, but it's very nice, to hear the experiences of everybody. I'm a little bit nervous. But, okay, so very simple. I just finished my bachelor's. I'm 43 years old. I moved here 20 years ago, so I've been kind of pursuing my dream. So
It's beautiful. Yeah.
I just graduated, but it's something so special to me because it's like 20, almost like 20 years.
Congratulations.
And I am so grateful because I found all these, you guys, beautiful people. What you do is teaching us, and I'm just very happy. And I want to really do something special, which is share my knowledge. I've been an occupational therapist for kids with autism for 6-7 years. So I believe in changing the world. And that's my purpose. I want to really learn what yoga is about. I've been practicing. I come from, I was a professional athlete, bodybuilder. So I started practicing yoga I would say 15 years ago. Never taught yoga, but I've been practicing. And I just love, the philosophy, their beliefs, and everything. I've been practicing yoga, different types of yoga for quite some time. So I just feel like it's the time to learn really, profoundly, and, do something with that.
Beautiful.
The knowledge,
Beautiful.
And that's what I want to do.
Great. And
So
did you
that's
do
why
your
I'm here.
OT? Did you do your OT at Long Beach?
No, I did it here in Los Angeles.
Okay. So Cal State LA? Yeah.
No, it's called CBD College. So.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. 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 Great.
Thank you.
Vinyas. Yeah. Vinyas.
Hi, I'm Venus. I'm based in LA right now. I've been practicing Kundalini yoga for like the last, I think it's been 8 or 9 years. I became a yoga teacher at the height of COVID. I was in teacher training. And since then, I've been teaching privates and practicing and doing sound baths and stuff like that. But I found out about this program many years ago through Felicia Tomasco from LA Yoga Magazine. And we would stop by for some of the classes and deliver magazines, and I've just always been curious about it. I am by trade a fashion designer, and I've made apparel and turbans and stuff for the wellness yoga world. And that's how I got introduced to yoga as a practice. So I'm just happy to check in again to just query with myself to see if it's the next step I'd like to take. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And did you do fashion design in college also?
I did. I did. I grew up in Chicago.
Ah.
And I went to fashion design school there, and then I moved to New York, and then I moved to San Francisco, and then I moved to LA. So I've designed and manufactured here for the last 12 years.
And you've lived in all the big cities, as have I. Chicago, New York, and
Yes.
yeah, LA. So, yeah.
That's why I moved to Ojai for a year. Had never been in a small.
Calm it down. One of our alums has a beautiful studio now in Ojai.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, she's in India right now, but yeah, we will visit there in August.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So how about Carol? Are you able to be audible to us?
Oh,
There
hi.
she is.
I am now, actually. I started this while driving and I made it home. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm Carol. I'm just hopping on to learn more about the program. I've been practicing yoga for 15 years and teaching for about 10 part-time as I got my degree for 15 years ago, actually in environmental toxicology, and I work in a field of science, and chemistry and in a holistic way, product stewardship. And I just, it's really find yoga to be a lifelong practice and interest of mine, to, host workshops and to share it with the world, whether that's in a small way part-time, but in doing, several 200 hours and 500 hours, and with some interest in therapeutics and one-on-one going into yoga, healing a back injury is something I'm passionate about. And I've worked with one of my teachers, Romy Phillips, and Denise Woods, who I believe went through the program. They were some of my first teachers early on, and so just inspired me to teach in the capacity that I can. And I figured it feels like a time in my life where I may be able to manage the master's program.
It sounds like you're in LA, Carol.
Oh yes, I am in Los Angeles, more closer to downtown. So the LMU seems like another planet, probably.
I know, you live where all the hip people live, I'm sure. So we're just sort of, I don't know what we are over here, but it's nice.
Yeah, but I commute and work the 9 to 5, but yoga is really where my heart is, and where the only other kind of master school I've been studying on my free time. That's really where it has elevated my life in a lot of ways.
Wonderful. Okay, and Priti, are you able to make yourself audible? There she is.
Yes, hi. Just wanted to just listen. Thank you so much. My name is Preeti, and I am interested in this, just exploring right now. I currently work in the arts and administration. I currently live in Portland, Oregon. I graduated from UCSD with a BA in journalism and communications in 1994. And yoga's always been a part of my life. And I actually did the 200-hour Yoga Alliance about 15 years ago from Sacred Movement in Los Angeles and Venice, Santa Monica, when I was living there at the time. But I actually didn't finish because I didn't turn in my final paper because I made a right turn into arts administration. So I have the 200 hours, I just didn't get it officially. I'm currently exploring a possible right turn in my life and wondering about going back to school. And I'm not yet sure about it. And when I was researching, it's always been a dream of mine to do this yoga studies master's. Yoga has been a huge part of my life. My mom actually studied with Iyengar in India personally. And so I grew up practicing yoga next to her in the house when she was practicing. And so yoga was just interwoven in my life. And I grew up with all the legends of the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, and it's just a normal part of my life. So there's something in my heart that's always wanted to go back to it. I'm not yet sure if this right turn is going to happen in my life. I have to figure out some life details as I listen to all of you talk about busy lives. I completely understand. And if I were to make this right turn, I'd want to move to Los Angeles. But at this moment, it's more of a dream and I'm exploring. So it's been really nice to hear people's experience because I still have a lot to figure out. But I figured listening in and reading a little bit more and hearing people's experiences would be a good idea.
Wonderful. So is it time for me to do a quick overview and introduce the faculty?
Yes, please, Dr. Chappell.
Okay.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. We do love hearing about you.
Definitely. So the program. It's linguistic, Sanskrit language. It's historical. It's philosophical. It's analytical. It's spiritual. It's psychological, and it's philosophical. So and it's physiological, as well as anatomical. And we have our flesh body, we have our body beyond and deeply within the flesh. And as you know from your experiences of both yoga and culture, there's just so much richness to be explored. We have 2 pathways, 3 actually, yoga studies pathway, 3 semesters of Sanskrit, 5 semesters of philosophy and spirituality, 3 semesters of the physical aspects of yoga, a culmination process, which is a final thesis or project, could be designing a teacher training for a particular population. And then we have the capacity to have a specialization in the yoga therapy mode, where you do a little bit less Sanskrit and you choose whether you want to do more sociology, history, or the mysticism course. Or you can complete, which I think is the bonus program, is to complete everything and then stay on and take additional courses in yoga therapy. We are transitioning into a winter India experience. In years past, including this past summer, we have spent the summer, or 3 to 4 weeks of the summer, and some people would stay on longer. But our change of location and the unrelenting monsoons up on that plateau where the program now takes place made it impractical to continue in the summer, and it's simply more comfortable to be in India in the winter. We will be announcing details in that regard soon. As you've heard from our alums, there are these wonderful community experiences we build with one another. Now, let me explain. I'm the founding director. My name is Christopher Chappell. And what brought me to yoga as a teenager was a really nasty scoliosis and decades and decades and decades, okay? And Lori's always saying, scope of practice, no promises, but it all resolved, and rather remarkably so. And this coupled with my, so that was my teenage agony, but what this brought me into from a young age was asana and pranayama and meditation and the study of Buddhism and a remarkable introduction to amazing people, including my guru, Anjali Inti, when I had just turned 18. And for 12 years ago, my wife and I were part and parcel of Yoga Anand Ashram in Amityville, New York. Zoe has visited there. And it was founded by Gurani Anjali, as we call her, in 1972. She passed in 2001. I passed from New York to California in 1985. And began to gather every 3rd Wednesday for 5 years, people from the emerging yoga community from 1996 to 2001. Amazing people. And we did each and every Yoga Sutra, talking about commentaries, chanting it, conversing. And I went to my deans and I said, we need to have a program. There's this thing happening in the universe. And they said, no. What are you, or what is that? And then they finally gave blessings to start certificates, which we launched in 2002. And we literally graduated 1,000 people from these certificates. And the university came back and said, you should have a master's program. And I said, oh, what a great idea. So we began the application process in 2008. We got approval to launch in 2013, and should you apply to the program, you will be part of cohort 11. From day one, we have been video streaming and video archiving. We are, we were the first program to be approved at the university by the regional accreditation agency to have these modalities of delivery. So that when the pandemic came, not only did we not lose a beat, but our student population doubled. And we're still getting that bubble through with some, classes that are pushing 20 people. And that's sort of thrilling, except if you're Lori and you've got 20 people doing yoga therapy all at once. But it's good. It's really been very, very, very fine. In addition to daily practice for more than 50 years, I remember having a dream living on Long Island, and I dreamt what I've become. And believe me, I was a bad Sanskrit student. I had not had Latin. I did not know what a declension was. I didn't know how I was ever going to learn this alphabet, but I had this dream that I was actually translating. And this has been my life. I've published more than 20 books. This includes a translation of the Yoga Sutra with a word-by-word analysis. I've done the same for the Bhagavad Gita. I have a book coming out. I would hope to mail it to the press today, but it'll be State University of New York Press on the Sankhya. I have another book coming out on yoga, rather Hinduism, yoga, and ecology with Mandala Press, associated with the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. And anyway, I've had really nothing but gratitude for the gifts that yoga has given, and nothing but gratitude for the fine faculty that continue to support this program, and above all else, for all of the students that continue to show up with their stories and with their vulnerability and with their willingness to become part of something that I think we all feel it's just bigger than any one little piece of us. So with that, I'd like to introduce Zoe as faculty member.
Hi, everybody. Great to meet you. A couple of you I've seen before. So I think I want to start by just speaking about my journey, because it was also very circuitous, particularly in relation to academia. Like you, Suzanne, I've had a love-hate relationship with it, although I think if I'd found this program 20 years ago, I would have gone right there. But instead, I originally studied engineering at Cooper Union in New York. I'm from New York. I started practicing yoga when I was 15. And when I was 20, I met my teacher, Patabi Joyce, and I practiced with him for a month. And at the end, he said, come to Mysore. And I said, okay. I quit school. Don't remember what my parents thought, but I don't think I asked them. Quit school, went to India for 5 months, and I kind of kept going back and forth. After 9/11, I went to India and I moved straight to Northern California. From there, it just sort of seemed like a good idea. I also lived in Berkeley for a while and got to take some classes, which Berkeley's amazing. And then was waiting to become a resident to go back to school. I thought I wanted to study cognitive science at that time. But then I ended up moving back to New York and ended up going back to school at Columbia, where I finished my undergrad, still thinking I was going to study cognitive neuroscience or psychology. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to take a Sanskrit class. And I'd started studying Sanskrit in India with a teacher, and every time I'd go, I sort of I'd study very diligently. I'd study for a few months, then I'd come home and I'd buy a book and I'd study for an hour every day. And, just to say, in terms of what I recommend for those of you who study Sanskrit, it's good to do. Consistency is important. And so I definitely recommend an hour a day. And so I did an hour a day, and then I'd get to 6 months and sort of I have questions and I don't have a teacher, and then I'd quit. And then I'd go back to India. And I did this for years, so that by the time I got to Columbia, I was sort of in this funny place where I knew a lot, but there were also things I didn't know. And sort of I had these weird gaps. So I took the beginner and intermediate classes simultaneously with Gary Tubb, who then left and went to Chicago, who is amazing if you ever get a chance to hear him speak. And I took the beginner and intermediate simultaneously. It was 3 hours of Sanskrit, 3 days a week. It was amazing. And so I decided, okay, I guess I'm going to do this. So I finished majoring in the South Asia Studies program there. And then they're sort of well, why don't you do a PhD? And so I said, okay. And I applied only there. I rolled over kind of into it. I finished the master's, but due to a bunch of circumstances, Gary Tubb, my professor, leaving and things changing, I decided to stop after the master's. I opened a yogashala in New York. I've been teaching since I was 18. It just sort of happened. And I taught there for many years. I also wrote my Sanskrit textbook, which I teach from, thank you, in the program. And I kind of feel like I wrote it for this program. I didn't know that at the time, but it's a Sanskrit textbook for yoga students. I wrote it for my students at my shala at that time. And then it turned into a book. But learning to read Sanskrit through Sanskrit texts, through yoga texts specifically. And so I did that. And then at a certain point, I finished writing my book. I did a little translation of the Aparikshanubhuti, which is 144 verses. It seemed like, oh, that's a good project. I could do a verse a day. I was having sort of a little postpartum feeling after finishing my book. I sent it to my publisher and I was like, oh, do you want to publish this? And he said, let's sell some copies of your book first. So, but he told me to actually send it to Dr. Chappell, who I'd met a few years earlier in New York. And I sent it to him and he said, you should use this as a basis of a PhD dissertation and you should work with Chakravarti Ramprasad in Lancaster. So I sent it to him and I wrote to him and I ended up doing this distance PhD through Lancaster while, having a yogashala full-time while doing, 10 other things. So I absolutely empathize with that. And I finished my PhD last summer. So I've been a student relatively recently, but I've also been teaching for 20 something years. So I sort of have, like both sides of the coin. And like I said, it took me a long time to figure it out. But if this program had existed, I probably would have just been like, oh, this is, this is it. Nice to meet you, Preeti. And anyway, so and somehow I have ended up here, not somehow, but I started teaching the Sanskrit class for this program during the pandemic. And I taught it from New York. And so it sort of was this fortuitous occasion that I could teach it and sort of fell in love with teaching these students in this program. And I moved to LA and learned how to drive, which has been quite an undertaking, but it's given me a lot of empathy for my students learning something new as adults. And yeah, this program is it's the perfect place for me as a scholar and practitioner. And that's one of the things that's so amazing to me about it. All of our students are both practitioners and scholars. And I think the program is really designed to support both of those things at whatever level you are. So, however much you've studied, I think, we work with everybody individually to kind of continue from where you are. What else can I say? So yes, in the Sanskrit class is pretty rigorous. We go through, my book is divided into 3 sections and we do, 1 section each semester. Everybody does at least a year and, we read a lot of Bhagavad Gita, a lot of Yoga Sutra. In the 3rd semester, we read a lot of Upanishads with tastes of other, the Hatha and other lesser known texts. And it's, like I said, I definitely recommend an hour a day rather than, spending an entire, your whole weekend doing it. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun. I know you had specific questions, Shannon, about the workload. And so, there's homework for each class. We meet twice a week. There are also quizzes for each chapter. What else can I say? I'm also teaching the yoga philosophy class this semester, as well as the thesis writing class. And it's so much fun. I mean, yesterday, and I think not just fun, but inspiring and, makes, as Amanda was saying before, just makes you question everything you came into the program thinking about. Dr. Chappell came in and spoke for a few minutes yesterday, and we're talking about the Bhagavad Gita at the moment and sort of sparked this conversation about the nature of love in the Bhagavad Gita. And we talked about it for, a couple of hours and how could, what does it mean to love without attachment? And, do we even want that? And and also what's the role of morality and ethics and how does that play into these texts, and just fascinating conversations. And I love what everybody in the program brings to it. Everybody comes to it from such a different perspective. And so even though I've been reading these texts for over 20 years, I always, walk away inspired thinking about new things. And so I'm really just grateful to, everybody, all of our students and faculty and everybody in this program. So please join us. I'm teaching the Foundations program this summer, so we will be in person getting to bond. And there really is this amazing bond between the students, even despite the distance. It really doesn't seem to matter. Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
As it pertains to the Foundations program, is that something that low residency students are doing in conjunction with in-person students?
Yes, so everybody meets at the beginning in the summer, and that's part of the beauty of it. I mean, everybody joins together for 2 weeks, and it's sort of intensive every day. And we also take field trips, and we start a little Sanskrit, and you get a foundation in in yoga, in writing, in sort of remembering what academia is about. So the things you kind of had questions about, but it's a time for everybody to come together and sort of make that connection. So then when you go back to your home, if you're doing the low residency, you have that foundation with everybody else.
Thank you.
So I've taught every course in the program except the yoga therapy and the yoga and the health science. So I want to introduce Dr. Lori Fazio to explain what it is that I really don't know, and that you all will know.
Thank you, and it's so nice to see you all here. I just want to share a funny story. Carol, you talked about Romy Phillips. I am married because of Romy. So I owe my marriage to Romy. So I love her in many, many ways. So I can share the story another time, but it's because of her that I am married. So yes, she's one of my favorite people.
Lovely.
But she's moved to the East Coast now. So she is now she's training as a nurse. Still a yoga teacher, but she's been training at Johns Hopkins, actually. So really exciting to follow her. So I'll give you just a brief about myself. Let's see, I'm from upstate New York. I did my bachelor's at Boston University. 10 years later, I did my master's in Australia, University of South Australia. 10 years after that, I did my doctorate at Massachusetts General Hospital Institute of Health Professions in Cambridge. And I'm a little overdue for this next 10 year, I think, for my next degree. So it's kind of every 10 years. So those of you who are concerned about coming back to school, yes, I understand. I have been continuing studies in yoga ever since. So I see that as my ongoing schooling. And I have to say, when I'm in a real formal program, it's an eye-opener, wakes me up again to how much work or even how long a Zoom session could be without a break. When I'm teaching, the time goes by because I'm the one who's so engaged. But when I'm the listener, every hour I need to get up and move around. So it reminds me, we have to make sure everybody gets up and move around. So my background academically is as a physical therapist. I knew I was going to do that since I was 16 years old. And so I had a practice in Los Angeles, very deeply involved in the physical therapy world, working with people's physical bodies, yet my personal life was very different from my professional life. So I've been a physical therapist for over 35 years, and I've been studying yoga for about over 30 years, 31, 32 years. So almost as long as the time that I've been a physical therapist. And I was attracted to yoga on a spiritual quest. It wasn't for any of the physical things. So I came in through the spiritual door, and then had a life-changing experience when I was overseas in Asia, when my teacher said, you have to go study in India. Because in the early 90s here in Los Angeles, all the teachers that I studied with had studied in India. And so that was the next thing, is you're going to go to India. So something happened over there that was life-changing for me and triggered an interest in studying Buddhism. So I started to study a little bit of Buddhism, and then that led me to the Dalai Lama, being with a small group of people in the Dalai Lama and hearing him say, always go back to your own tradition and find what's there. So I went back and studied Kabbalah and comparative Zen Buddhism and Kabbalah, and kind of went that route. And all this time, as a physical therapist, I'm working with people in chronic pain, and people in chronic pain, I'm reading the science of pain science. And at the time, it was all about neuroscience, how the brain is changing when you have chronic pain. This is what happens in your brain. But at the same time, I'm in my personal life practicing meditation and diving into all elements of yoga and learning, wow, the same things in neuroscience we're studying in particularly meditation component of yoga. These are the opposite things. My patients need this. My patients need yoga. That's what they need. So I started to integrate, kind of coming in from that perspective. And then, of course, many people started to practice yoga, and they knew that I practiced yoga. So they'd come to me, yoga teachers, with their injuries. And of course, they wanted to look at the physical postures. And so I would do that. And yes, I love it. I love the anatomy and I love all that. And it's super important. And yet I was really interested in the subtle body and helping people to recognize it doesn't really matter where your foot is unless you're hurting yourself. What matters is your experience in the posture. That's if you're practicing asana. So I started to work with a lot of people in yoga, and Larry Payne, who started our yoga therapy trainings here at LMU, reached out to me back in 2007, and he said, I've been sending you patients for years. You've been sending me patients for years. We need to meet. We need to get together. And he said, you need to do my teacher training. I did a training in 2000 for integrating it into my physical therapy. I wasn't out teaching. So Larry wanted to have me join his next teacher training, and then the universe threw me to the ground off of a horse, and I could no longer practice physical therapy, or so I was told by my doctor. So I called Larry, said, I can't do your teacher training. I can't drive. I can't move. I'm having all these injuries. So he came to my house and did one-on-one teacher training. So that was training with Larry. And then a few years later, I'm very inquisitive. I have a lot of questions. I want to know why this, why this, why this. And Larry said, my cup is empty. I think you should go study with Swami Veda. I think he's the next person that you should study with. And it just so happens that the Himalayan tradition, their ashram, is coming to Mexico for a month. Go there. Then you don't have to go over to India. You can go there and you can study. So I did that, and I studied in the Himalayan tradition. And then I started teaching for Larry in the yoga therapy program here. I still had my practice. And then in 2014, I joined the master's program to teach the soul health science and yoga course, which I loved. And that fast forward has evolved into a track within the yoga therapy. So it first became an additional year. We had a lot of students that are interested in studying the health benefits of yoga. And so it's an additional 3 courses. 2 of them you substitute out, and then you take an additional course. And you can get your master's and a postgraduate in yoga therapy. Postgraduate certificate in yoga therapy. A lot of students wanted to do it. That you do that as a 3rd year after. You take all the MA courses and then you take these 3 courses and you get that. A lot of people want to do it during the MA for different reasons. So that's when you can do this substitution out. So a little bit about that. The approach that I take in the master's is, I think, quite unique to a lot of the yoga therapy trainings that are out there. And just as a background, I have a bit of an aversion to the term yoga therapy because, and I had a conversation with Stoma, who's from the Himalayan tradition. We spoke for almost 2 hours today on this, that he's a clinical psychologist. He's also, Chris, is he a Swami? I never remember. I think he's a Swami in the Himalayan tradition. So we both have an aversion to the term therapy because therapy infers something's broken and you're going to fix it. And the basic premise in yoga is you're not broken, right? But there's a wholeness to you, and it's the illusion is that you think that you're this brokenness, but that's actually not what you are. And so the approach that we take is unique in that we look at the various practices of yoga from a very broad perspective, everything from, I would say, bhakti to asana, with everything in between, mudra, mantra, meditation, pranayam, and really what are the effects purported from the yogic understanding of the body, the subtle body, and the spiritual approach, to the modern medical and the psychological understanding, science, the evidence-based science from that perspective. So putting these on an equal plane, not a hierarchy of it's Western or it's yogic, but really let's look at the human experience from different perspectives. And then when you encounter a human being, what is it that might be beneficial to them? How can I help this person? Where's their dukkha? Where's their suffering? And how can we support them to identify? A lot of it's looking at the vasanas and samskaras, these kind of imprints in how we live our lives, because these are really the feeders to every dis-ease that somebody is experiencing, be it on the physical plane, emotional, mental, spiritual. This is very different to the clinical approach, which is what's the diagnosis and then what do we do for it? So we still look at diagnoses because you do need to understand how to work safely with people. We still look at that. But in this particular graduate yoga therapy program, it's really focused on stepping back, looking at the individual, learning how to be with another human and understand their suffering, and then let's say tools from your yoga. I don't really love that tools, but what approach or tools can you offer to support that person? And so the courses, just briefly, everybody takes health science and yoga 1. And somebody had asked about kind of the curriculum. I recognize somebody here is coming in as a lawyer. Somebody else is coming in as a kota, right? So Selah, is I pronouncing that? Selah probably has anatomy and physiology background. Shannon, I'm guessing that's not been in your wheelhouse. So here I am, you come from different backgrounds and we're all together in class and we want to have an understanding. So it's not a waste of time for Selah and it's actually not over the head of Shannon. So the way that the course is structured is there are readings and videos and then a quiz that you can get a self-assessment. Do I understand enough material so that when I come to class, we can actually apply this and look at it through the yogic lens? And so I would say, from having taught this from 2014, we have had healthcare providers and we've had people with zero understanding, and everybody gets something out of it. And I know Judith is smiling because Judith came to me and said, this is not my background, not my wheelhouse. And don't worry about it. You're gonna get what you need from this. You're gonna get something that's gonna be helpful. And so many people, as Judith has come to say that. So we look at the different systems of the body from the yogic anatomy understanding and the modern medical. Then I also teach, and I think Zoe and I might be switching off, the Hatha Yoga class. And so in Hatha Yoga, we look at texts and we take them through the history of going from like Dattatreya's Yoga Shastra, the first that calls Hatha Yoga, and then going through the evolution and looking at different texts, and then also looking at it because Hatha Yoga is looking at the body as a vehicle for liberation. And so we look at a little bit of that sometimes from the health perspective. But the other 3 yoga therapy courses that are an option for people to take if they want to go that way. There's health science and yoga too. I have to say, I think this is my favorite class that I've ever put together. There's a lot that goes into this class. It is definitely a lot of work, and understanding that everybody's busy. It's constructed so that each week you're doing a portion of this large project. And I think that most people at the end of the semester step back and think, whoa, what did I just create here? I know Ayana's done it. You choose a population that you would like to serve through yoga, you'd like to study more. Ayana chose African-American birthing people because the mortality rate in African-American birthing people is so high. And we know that the reasons that it's so high, there's a lot of social justice reasons. And then there's an approach that we can take from yoga as well to support. So, and yes, the residency can do this. Yes, everything is online as well. And so we've had people work with things like migraines. We had somebody work with post-COVID. We had university educational programs. Somebody is working with African Americans in a low socioeconomic hospital who have hypertension and is now doing an double IRB study with the Cleveland Clinic in the Midwest and LMU to look at, can this program reduce hospital readmissions and hypertension and death by an education and yoga program for that. Another person is working with survivors of domestic violence, and an international organization has taken that on. And so she's doing a first round, then we'll do an IRB study. We have another one who is working on menopause, and she's in Israel and has been doing this distance from Israel, and called up a gynecologist that she happened to have seen and said, hey, I'm doing this. Maybe you have someone who's interested, and the gynecologist is not only interested, but is working to get it implemented in their whole public health system because she was so impressed with it. So these programs have really helped to serve. It was part of the design of it to help people take what they want to do out into the world. But in the class, we are learning these effects of the practices, and then the program that you're creating is a placeholder. So if we're looking at, let's say, mantra, and we're looking at the health benefits of mantra, as well as the yogic benefits of mantra or intention of mantra, and then you look at, well, but what about my population? So if you're working with a trauma population, there are multiple reasons from a polyvagal perspective why you'd want to use mantra. There are reasons why people who are post-pregnancy would want to use mantra. So we look at all of these things, and then you have this project. Alongside that is another course that's totally different. It's a skills-based class. We learn motivational interviewing, yogic counseling, a very extensive breath assessment to understand the autonomic nervous system. That's the wheelhouse of the yoga therapist. That is not duplicating another profession. So a lot of people are trying to be like physical therapists. I'm a physical therapist. I'm going to tell you, I've studied an insane number of years. There's no way 1,000-hour yoga therapy training is going to come close to the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours that a PT or an OT that we might have. So you don't need to be a PT. You're a yoga therapist, or you're studying yoga. That's the wheelhouse that you have. And breath is a huge part of that. So we focus a lot on that and a few other things in that. And we have case studies. I've videotaped sessions where you watch either me or another yoga therapist working with a real client. And we have this great software, all kinds of applications at LMU, where you have like almost real-time conversations with your classmates, even though you might do it in a different time zone, at a different time, where you put comments and feedback about that. And then in the practicum class, you have two options. You can take your program that you did in Health Science 2. If you want to do IRB or not, that's another thing that we can do. IRB is implement it and do a little pilot program with it. Collect some data and either write a case series, either for the class and or for a publication if you want to beef it up a little bit. And or some people turn that into their thesis. They do more with that and build that more, but you can do that program, or you work one-on-one with clients. And then we do mentoring both individually, professor and student, which is another difference in a lot of the yoga therapy programs out there. Is I'm trying to support you in your path. What is it you want to do versus just here's the content we're teaching and then go do it. But really, what is it that you want to do? Who are the people you want to work with? And then getting mentorship in that, as well as group mentoring. And so those are the main parts. And there's a few other things, but I'll leave it at that.
Great. I'd like Narinjan to speak up a bit. And Narinjan has served as acting director when I was on sabbatical in 2019 and 2020, and has taught various courses, including the philosophy course, the comparative mysticism course. So Narinjan.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. Yeah, my name is Dr. Naranjan Khalsa, and I teach both in our Theological Studies department as well as the Yoga Studies department. I came here first to teach Sikhism and Jainism, and have taught, as Dr. Chappell said, in both the yoga philosophy course as well as comparative mysticism. I was born in the Sikh and Kundalini yoga communities, so that's just kind of what I was raised with. I became very interested in the Sikh musical tradition and have gone to India and studied the kind of pre-colonial form of Sikh kirtan, both on the drums. I guess you can't really see them there. They're under the fabric, the Jodi Pakavage, and that interest really brought me to graduate school. Prior to graduate school, though, I worked for all of the Kundalini yoga events, the various events that we had, and got my 200-hour teacher training about 20 years ago, I guess now. In graduate school at University of Michigan, we have a Sikh studies program there, and it was in an area studies program. So I was able to take all different sorts of classes that really fit into this project that I wanted to do, documenting and thinking about lineage, transmission of knowledge over time of oral traditions, the role of music. So I took a lot of ethnomusicology, anthropology classes. And so a lot of my approach is really ethnography, as well as what I'm interested in also sharing with students in that comparative mysticism class is the value of music, and thinking about how poetry and music and artistry allow us to go beyond, you know, the ego mind, the definitions that we create, the boundaries that we create, how when we go into that mystical space, it can be so hard to articulate, but how we can do that through music, through poetry. And so after graduate school, I came to LMU, and it's been just such a wonderful community, and being able to share in community, both online and in person, has been incredibly valuable and enriching. And I think, as Zoe said, I think we all, you know, we learn from you, and as much as we're teaching, we're also learning. And that's such a beautiful give and take, because everyone that enters the program is coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, different forms of knowledge that they're bringing forth and sharing. And so it's been a really wonderful experience learning with everybody. And within the Kundalini yoga community recently, with you know, issues of abuses of power and these kinds of dynamics, those are other things that I'm really interested in speaking to. So not only the history and the philosophy, or, you know, the psychological, mystical ways that we can understand our interconnectedness and the ways that we relate to one another, but then also thinking about how that affects life here today, you know, our contemporary experiences and what that means. And so being able to relate everything that we're learning to our own individual circumstances, to the contexts that we are in, and really being able to kind of think about what that means to continue to learn and grow beyond maybe just particular frameworks or particular ideas that we have. How can we continue to expand those horizons? And so those are things that I find interesting, and I like sharing with everybody, and just being part of this community has been such a joy.
And last but not least, I want to introduce Judith Carlisle, not only a graduate of the program, as we heard, but also will be teaching with us in the fall. And we have taken the content of what you heard from some of the alums earlier that was included in the Yoga, Mindfulness, and Social Change class, and redefined and retitled the History of Modern Yoga class. So now it will be Yoga, Mindfulness, and Social Change, and the abbreviated form is Yoga Mindful Change. So we're thrilled to welcome Judith. She has taught a similar course at Naropa University in Colorado and joins us today from Annapolis, Maryland.
Good evening. So it's quite late here. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm really excited to be here. I think I'm going to strive for some brevity here. I'll just give a bit of my background as it relates to this subject, to let's say to yoga, and also to this idea of engaged enlightenment. Yoga as an agent of social change and bringing social justice into the world. So my first moment of consciousness as a child, 2 years old, I know I was 2. My very first memory of being in the world is doing yoga with my grandmother. My grandmother, a Black woman living in Alexandria, Virginia, tuned into Richard Hittleman's Yoga for Health on TV and did yoga with Richard Hittleman. And I started, so I started very, very young with the yoga practice, but it came and left yoga throughout my life. As a graduate student, I would find in Tucson, Arizona, I would find some kind of off the map communities where I was able to practice yoga. I was always aware of yoga as a very centering practice. As a young child, I grew up as a person of color in very white communities. And I would say some communities that really didn't want Black people around. One was a specific white flight community, a community where people had moved as busing was becoming a reality. They created a community and their own kind of school, insulated school system to protect their children from busing. And we showed up, my family showed up. My last name is Carlisle. I had a teacher who was sure that we were actually an activist named Stokely Carmichael, that we were Stokely Carmichael's children who had cleverly changed our last name. But so this made me have a real awareness of injustice in the world. As a very young child, I actually was, I worked with Cesar Chavez's grape boycott. I would stand as a little Black girl in front of grocery stores telling everybody that they couldn't buy grapes or lettuce, because we had to support that lettuce boycott. And I got to meet people at the time. We were living in Montgomery County, Maryland. And I got to meet people. I got to meet Cesar Chavez, and I got to meet how he put stones in his shoes so that he could add to his suffering. And I would mimic these things. And so I had very much a spiritual path. And I think, Lori, when I first met you, I think what I said was, I know the leg bone is connected to the hip bone, and that's about it. Because I also grew up in a Christian Science household where there is, very, very little interaction with the physical self. So I would say that I had this very, very conflicted upbringing. And it was always, yoga was a place that I would come back and find two things. I would find a safe place for my spirit, and I'd also find some ability to put my recognition, my understanding of a desire to create more justice in the world through that practice. It seemed to me to be so related. Of course, in high school, I learned about Gandhi and the fight for India's independence. And strangely enough, it wasn't until I was an adult that I learned about Martin Luther King Jr.'s use of the yoga traditions in his work for civil rights. So, but I came to see yoga very much as an agent for social change. And that's something that I've worked hard to, I did have to work hard, but I really bring out in the yoga mindfulness and social change. So first we went through that certificate, recreated the certificate from one aligned with, let's say, bringing yoga as an agent for change from a therapeutic perspective to one of a social justice perspective. And that's something that we look at very much in the Yoga Mindfulness and Social Change certificate. And that's that will be a focus of this class that I'll be doing in the fall. So I think that it gives a big opportunity to learn from some of the yoga from literature that we consider to be classic literature, things like the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, how these underlie a practice of social justice and where we find it in some surprising places. And then how this it can underlie all of our work in yoga. I remember Chris Chappell very early on, one of the things that he told us in class was that often people come to yoga because they have suffering of some sort. And he's like, physical suffering, mental suffering, psychic suffering. And then they stay because very, very quickly they find that the yoga addresses that in some way. And that's, and I loved that. It really helped me understand my lifelong attraction to yoga. I also recall with Dr. Fazio, learning about the yoga therapy really helped me start to understand some of the sort of the unresolved issues of, I want to say trauma, that I had not worked out for myself because I had never associated yoga with that type of personal work. I saw it very much as working in the world and as a physical practice. But I came to see many, many opportunities for healing, for exploring the spirit and healing the spirit in many ways. And I know that sounds probably crazy, right? But I recall a time when I was a professor at University of Michigan in the Flint campus, and a student came up to me who found out that I did yoga and started talking to me about ahimsa. And I literally said, "Oh, what's up?" Because despite this relationship with yoga for all of these years, I realized now that I was engaged with a very appropriated, colonized yoga. And I really didn't have anybody to open my eyes and give me education into this other side of yoga, to give me a more well-developed understanding of the practice. And that's something too that we'll work for in this as we work together. So I want to be brief.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. Saving the best for last, which is all of you. So if you have any questions, we're happy to be with you. And if you're ready to get on with whatever it is that you need to do tonight, that's fine too.
Before we take questions, I encourage you to use the reactions at the bottom. You can raise your hand and move forward. There are a couple of sessions after this one that's on financial aid and another for international students. I don't think we have any international students in this session today, but there are a couple of sessions after us. So hopefully you'll be able to join those. If you can, I can post the information, or I believe if Emily has it, we can put it in the chat just to make sure you all have it. So yes, please, by all means, ask away.
I have a question related to summer sessions. I was just looking at, the anticipated, I guess, schedule for fall 2023 and 2024. And I was a little bit unclear as to whether or not in this program, if you have a class in the first summer session, the second, or both, or how that works.
Okay, so the foundations course is more or less October 15th to 29th. It varies a couple of days depending upon the calendar.
August.
And that's when we invite. Yeah, Ayana?
It's August.
August, sorry. Yes, of course. Thank you. August. And then particularly if you're doing the low residency, you would actually have 2 summers. Normally, you would do, if you're in the residential program, summer session 1, which is May 15th to July 1st, you would do the Buddhism course. And then from July 5th until August 8th, more or less, you would do the Jainism course. But you can stagger that, because if you're planning to continue to work full-time, it just may be easier. Our courses fall within Monday, Wednesday, 3 p.m.-ish to 7 p.m.-ish. So that if you're on the East Coast, it's 7 to 10 at night. And for summer session, it's the same, Monday, Wednesday from 4 to 7. And for 6 weeks, but twice a week. So that your study of Buddhism, your study of Jainism becomes your sole devotion during that period. And you could either go straight through the first summer, straight through the second summer, but you could also choose to give yourself a May-June break 1 year and a June-July break, or July into August break the next year. So I don't think I said that correctly, all the iterations that I gave. But first summer session, May 15th through the end of June. Second session is July through the first week of August.
No, that's helped. That clarifies. Thank you.
Great, great. Now let me just talk a little bit globally about expense and financial aid. We're making some progress with being able to support our students more robustly. Generally, if you are interested in financial aid and you're a citizen of the United States, and I think everybody here is, you file what is called FAFSA. FAFSA is the federal form for financial aid. Ayana has just put that up. And it requires for you to give us your tax, or we don't see them, but the financial aid office sees the financial aid records for tax forms and such. And then they make a recommendation in terms of, do you qualify for federal work-study aid? Do you qualify for guaranteed federal loans? Simultaneously, we help to devise an individual package for each student, whereby either you could receive a 25% tuition discount or a 50% tuition discount, which is more rare. Plus, we have various other scholarships and fellowships and assistantships. When Ayana joined us, she got an assistantship in a different office on campus, and that pays generally about $1,000 a month, and it helps take the edge off. And then we have these research fellowships that allow for support of a project that you may be working on, or allow support for you to be able to work with a faculty member to help with that faculty member's research program. So there are lots of different ways in which this gets put together. And generally, the university will ask for monthly payment so that your tuition isn't all due upfront. And what I'd like to say is that if you're in a situation where you really do need to take out a loan, you can think of it as a nice car. However, the car, I know, because I've had dozens of cars, the car will fall apart. Your education is forever. No one can take it from you.
It is an investment.
In a sense, yeah.
I like investment.
The session after this, the one about financial aid and how to pay for your graduate education does follow this. Emily did put a link if you had not registered for it before, if you'd like to attend. So the link is in the chat. If you're unable to stay any later, you can reach out to me. We do have a campus, an office on campus, the Office of National and International Fellowships. They put out a monthly newsletter that's bi-monthly, so it comes out every 2 weeks, listing the different scholarships that are available, the upcoming deadlines. Much of it is geared towards undergraduate education. However, there have been some really good opportunities for graduate students for scholarships. The good thing about thinking about and starting your application process now is that as you're writing your letter of intent and you're looking for scholarship applications and opportunities, you can simultaneously apply to those as well. That could possibly be ready for you in the fall. So the time is ripe now to start that process and to look at that. And as Dr. Shepard said, we have a number of opportunities internally as well.
And I also I don't think we have any veterans, but don't know for sure. But the federal government for veterans has paid many a student to be with us. And we actually have a graduate of the program who is now a full-time yoga therapist at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And this is something, share with your friends who may have had military experience, because it really has been healing for the veterans that have come through our program. And LMU in generally is nationally recognized for many things, including top 10 most beautiful campus, which at least you get to visit, if not be in the neighborhood, and for the work that we do with veterans. And there's a long list of other things we do well, including our library, which is behind Ayana, is really a top 10 college library and a remarkable, wonderful resource for all of you, whether you're on campus or remote. And they will actually mail to you books from the collection. We have access to PubMed. We have access, I mean, just the price of tuition. I had a student, former student, who was a graduate student at University of Davis, University of California, Davis, and the library card that he continued to treasure until they cut him off. As an alum, he still had access to the LMU library and found the LMU library far more robust in terms of electronic access than even the UC campus. There's a long story about why, but we're part of that story. We have an excellent collection for yoga studies and unlimited buying. So if you know of a book you really want us to have, let us know and we will get it.
I have one other quick question, sorry. I know that you're unveiling kind of a new India program that's going to be December as opposed to the summer. Do you know, I guess I was just trying to figure out what year do most people, or will people complete that in? Is that like your second year, your third year? And also, I also saw online, there was like a Jainism trip to India. Is that the same or is that different?
Okay, so the Jainism trip, as I mentioned before, we used to be in Delhi, and Delhi does not get hit so hard by the monsoon. They moved the trip to Pune, which gets the monsoon so difficult. And this past summer, roads were washed out, electricity would go out for long periods of time. I got COVID up in the mountains, and it was just, you know, none of the students got sick, but it was a big mess. And I really did not see the benefit in continuing that particular model. We have a jewel box Jain center. We have some superb community members from Jain tradition teaching within our program and in the neighborhood. Niranjan has taught that to great applause in years past. Our current director, the current professor, Abhishek Jain, is a born Jain. He is our Bhagwan Malina visiting assistant professor this year of Jain studies. Will be teaching it this summer. And when you ask, okay, when can you do it? And the way that we're setting it up, not only can you do it whenever you want, you can do it again and again and again. And Professor Fazio will be leader as we're moving toward final approvals. We're hoping to launch in December, and the focus, rather than Jainism, will be on yoga therapy with residents at Kaivalyadam Yoga Center and the center. They keep on changing the name, but it's Mahatma Gandhi Hospital in Pondicherry. So you'll have a Deccan experience and a East Coast experience. And then we're timing this roughly from December 7th to 21st so that you can also make it back for Christmas, or you could stay on in India for a couple of weeks. We have connections all over India where we could, provide connections if you want to, say, go to the Himalayan Institute, or, invite your whatever extended group of people to come and join you in India. But it will also be open to community members to participate in this experience as well. So I think that many of our alumni will be joining this program. And I look forward to see Lori's latest iteration of it as we move toward our.
I also have a video from one of the trips that was made to show the places that we go and the things that happen. Although Mahabalipuram was not on that video, but that is one of the places that we go.
Can you make sure I have a copy of that video? Good.
Thank you.
I have to get this through the dean, and if it lights up and moves, it always makes a better presentation. So.